Hello, and welcome to another virtual author chat at the Poison Pen Bookstore. The Poison Pen's distinguished guest author today is Valerie Burns, whose new book is Two Part Sugar, One Part Murder, a delightful cozy, the start to a new series. Before we begin our chat today, I'd like to let those listening in know that the Poison Pen does have copies of Two Part Sugar, One Part Murder, and we would be delighted to hold one for you or put one in the mail. It's real easy. Just give us a call at the bookstore or go online and you can be connected with this truly terrific book. And now I'd like to welcome Valerie.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be here.
We're delighted you could join us. I'm always fascinated by who an author was before they became published. Can you tell us a little bit about Valerie pre-publication?
Okay. Well, I am from a small town in Northwest Indiana. So you might recognize it as the place where Maddie Montgomery lands when she starts, when her airplane lands. So actually, I'm from South Bend, Indiana, and I've lived a lot in the Midwest, in Southwest Michigan and Northwest Indiana. So for those who aren't familiar with the area, the University of Notre Dame, which is one of my alma maters, is there. And I worked as a planner. I worked as a trainer, a corporate trainer for a number of companies. And now I'm a operations manager for a appliance manufacturer. I left the cold and went to I now live in northern Georgia, East Tennessee area. So those are a lot of the things that I did before I started writing.
What prompted you to decide I want to become an author, and what was your path to publication initially like?
Well, I think that I don't know that I grew up wanting to be an author. I grew up loving books and loving mysteries and reading a lot of mysteries. And over the years, over the decades, I had a list of, man, I wish somebody would write a book about. I wish there was a mystery about. And that list just kept growing and growing and growing. And I'm not finding that book out in the world. And at some point, you read so many mysteries and you think, well, maybe I should try my hand at writing that. If I want to read it, maybe there's somebody else out there like me who might want to read that too. So I think that's what kind of sparked my desire to want to write. But honestly, if somebody had written these books, I probably would be content just to sit at home and read books all the time and not necessarily have to go through all the work of, writing, because it's a lot of work.
It is. People don't realize that. If I understand correctly, the book that became your first published book was Traveling Shoes.
So Traveling Shoes is the first book I ever wrote, and it was actually not the first book that got published.
Oh.
The Plot is Murder, which is the first book in my mystery bookshop series, is the first book that got published, but Traveling Shoes was the first book that I wrote. And if anybody's ever read that one, they are going to recognize a lot of things that are familiar to my hometown of South Bend, Indiana, and just the university that's there and that community. So that was the first book that I wrote.
Okay. Now, if I also understand correctly, you kind of got some professional training in writing. You went to Seton Hill University. Is that it?
I did. So that was actually when I decided I want to be a writer. I don't feel like you need a degree to be a writer. Anybody can write, but it may not be something that people want to read. It may not be written well. It may not be formatted properly. You may have an idea, but you might need to polish, perfect, and get your story, better. so that people will want to read it, so it will be publishable. And so I wrote Traveling Shoes and sent out a ton of query letters to agents and editors, and never could get any interest in it, and I, would get something back and maybe rewrite it, and then, revise, rewrite, try again. And I joke that I probably have enough rejections to wallpaper a room. So, but the thing is, I didn't give up, and I decided I'm going to look at some authors that I really like and respect, and see what they did to get, where they are. And one of those authors was Victoria Thompson. She writes the Gaslight Mystery series, and I really loved her books. And I remember pulling her book off the shelf and reading her bio in the back. And I had read the bio in the back of her book many times, but this time was different. So I looked at it, and she changed her bio, and she'd updated it to say that she was an adjunct professor at Seton Hill University in Greensburg, Pennsylvania. And I had never heard of Seton Hill. I didn't know where Greensburg, Pennsylvania was. But at the time I was living in Indiana, and so not that far away, few hours. I looked it up, and I realized that they had a master's in fine arts in writing popular fiction. And she was one of the adjunct professors. And I remember thinking, if I could just maybe audit one of her classes. I already had a master's degree from Notre Dame. I'm like, I don't want another master's degree. I just want to know how to write. And so they did not have a option for auditing, but I went ahead and I applied. And it wasn't until I actually started filling out the application and going through the process that the desire to, get another degree actually came to me. But I got accepted into their program. And it was the great thing about that program is that it's a low residency program. So I didn't have to quit my job and, be on campus for 2.5 years. You take classes virtually, and then twice a year for 1 week each time you go on campus for residency. And so I did that. And my first residency, Victoria Thompson was not only an adjunct professor in the program, but she also was a student in the program working on her MFA. And so the interesting thing to me was I got to listen to her thesis defense, which, while I was there. And so it was really a great experience for me. I learned so much. I feel like I would not be published today were it not for the things that I learned in that program, which taught me how to write well. It taught me how to tell a story, and getting the critique and the feedback that you get from your peers and the other professors. All the professors in the program are published authors from a variety of genres. So I learned a lot about, I can be very focused, and I love mysteries. So my to be read pile of mysteries is huge. And I don't necessarily take time away from those to read horror or romance. That program forced me to, and I learned so much from reading outside of my genre, because there were so many interesting things going on in the science fiction world and in romance and in horror.
It's interesting because Seton Hill is one of the few academic universities that offers a degree in popular fiction. All the
Yes,
other universities focus on literary fiction or something like that.
exactly. And that was very, it was, I think, one of the things that I really loved about the program. And I've heard from other students who maybe tried other writing programs, other MFAs, and they focus on literary fiction and not necessarily on popular fiction or genre fiction. And um, it's like night and day, and they're very encouraging. And if you're in at Seton Hill and you want to write literary fiction, that's fine.
Mhm.
But you get to, do what you're passionate about. And that's one of the things that was really exciting for me about the program.
So you went through the program and that helped you get your first book published. Is that correct?
Yes, I got, you have two mentors when you're a student in the program. And my first mentor was an ex New York City police officer. So he was able to help me with some of the details. No, a cop's not going to act like that. You're going to need to change this. And then my second mentor was a woman who wrote cozy mysteries. So I felt like I got the best of both worlds in that. And they really helped me to know what I needed to do to make my story better and make it more interesting. I finished my thesis early in the 2.5 years. I finished a little early, and I had another idea. And I'm like, what if I wrote a mystery about a woman who's writing a mystery? And so that was the theory behind my mystery bookshop series. And so that was I started that project around my last semester at Seton Hill. And while I'm sending out queries for traveling shoes, I was finishing The Plot is Murder. And when I finished and went through a few passes of edits, I decided I'm going to just try sending out a query for this. And that's what people were interested in. So that book sold first, and I got a 3-book deal. And then, publishing's a little slow. So
Yeah.
before the first book even came out, I still was sending queries for traveling shoes, and I found a publisher that was interested in publishing traveling shoes. So
Was that Camel Press?
yes. Mhm.
That's a really unique press out on the West Coast.
Yes, there aren't a lot out on the West Coast, and it's a small press, but they have some really good books that have, won some awards out there.
So now we come to your new book, which is the launch of a new series. What can you tell us about Two Parts Sugar, One Part Murder?
So, Two Part Sugar, One Part Murder is a story about a fashionista, social media maven, Maddie Montgomery, who's a Navy brat. Her dad was a Navy admiral, and he's pretty much spoiled her. So she's never really had to fend for herself, and she's lived this kind of fairy tale life, I guess. And when her fiance decides to dump her in the middle of their live stream wedding, she's humiliated and she just wants to find some place to hide. So she learns that her great aunt Octavia, who she never really knew, has died and left her a house, a bakery, and a 250-pound English Mastiff in the small town of New Bison, Michigan. Well, Maddie's never heard of New Bison, so perfect place to hide out. So
Mhm.
she goes to New Bison and she decides, I'm going to sell this house and everything and come back triumphant. Except she learns that Aunt Octavia had other plans. And she stipulated that in order for Maddie to inherit, she has to live in New Bison and run the bakery and keep the dog for 1 year.
Mhm.
After a year, if she wants to sell, she can. But Great Aunt Octavia did not want her to just sell to these wealthy developers from the big city who want to come in and buy up all the land. Well, Maddie can't cook, but she's willing to give it a try. So she does. And not long after she arrives, um, the mayor who runs a hardware store next door is murdered, and Maddie's fingerprints are all over the murder weapon. So she's got to figure out who done it. And so that's really the start of, Maddie's story, is kind of coming into her own and learning to be independent and to use her skills to, solve crime.
There's so many wonderful things about the book. One of them is that there's also a connection to Sherlock. In the it's the Baker Street series. I mean, it took me a while because I'm not always the sharpest blade in the drawer, but I did pick up on that. I thought, wow, it's not only a baking culinary mystery, but you've got the Sherlock connection. And does that come from your own love of
Oh
classic?
yeah, I love mysteries. I love Sherlock Holmes. I love Agatha Christie. I'm a huge Agatha Christie fan. And I thought it would be interesting to have these Baker Street irregulars who are her team
Mhm.
of friends who will help her to solve the mystery, and not so much like her Sherlock in that he used children,
Mhm.
but maybe upgrade those a little bit and make them a little bit older and utilize their street smarts and savvy to help her solve crime. I love throwing in little things in my books, and sometimes people get them and sometimes they don't, but it just makes writing fun for me to throw things in there. Like New Bison is based on the city of New Buffalo in Michigan.
Oh,
And, if
mhm.
you're not from that area, you may not know that there's no New Bison, but people are like, hey, is that based on New Buffalo? It's like, yes, it is.
One of the other wonderful things about the book is the way that you kind of give readers multi-generational characters. Sometimes in a series, you get a focus on a group of like 20 something or 30 something characters, but you've also incorporated older characters as well as a few younger ones, and they're portrayed in a very realistic way, a very natural way, very relatable way. Can you talk a little bit about how you incorporated especially older characters into the
Well,
series?
thank you. Thank you. I appreciate that. So, my my first job when I graduated from college was working as a planner for an area agency on aging. And I was about 22 years old, and I'm working at an organization that supports senior citizens. My secretary was 85. I had a data clerk who was in her 60s. And so I'm the youngest person in this office. And I learned so much from these seniors. One of my jobs was as a planner, I would go to the organizations that the area agency funded. And the area agency on aging, most people don't know a whole lot about it, but they've been around since the 1960s. It was signed by, Lyndon Johnson. And so through the Older Americans Act. So there is an area agency on aging that covers every county in the United States, and they provide services. So most people have heard of Meals on Wheels. Those are one of the services that the area agency funds. One of my jobs was to go around and make sure that the agencies we funded were adhering to all the regulations from the federal, state, and local level. Well, I that required me going to senior centers and eating. So I would sit down and I would eat with a lot of seniors, and they would tell me stories, and I learned so much from them. The office manager at the area agency was, and she was probably in her 60s, and she took me to the casino. She taught me to play the numbers and so I learned a lot from being around seniors who were active and vital. My secretary, Rebecca, who was 85, she was doing this no aging diet, and she used to walk to work every day, and she was just very active. And I wanted to incorporate that. So in my mystery bookshop series, you see the girls from the senior, the nursing, it's not a nursing home, it's a retirement village that helps Samantha solve mysteries. And in this story, I have, Hannah, who is one of the bakers. And, I want to incorporate people from a variety of age groups and diversity into my book. So diversity, not just with the race of, people, but also with the age and their lifestyles.
Mhm.
So hopefully I can do that justice and be fair and not just show one side. I don't want to just show seniors as old and maybe disabled. They're active and vital and they can, do a lot. And young people, even though younger people may be more into social media than older people, um, they also can, make mistakes and they can learn things. And there's a lot that they can add to, I run into this a lot in my day job is, it's like, oh, well, they spend all their time on their phones. But whenever we have a problem, they're the ones we go to. Is like, hey, can you fix this for us?
Mhm. Yeah, you kind of incorporated that into Maddie, who's got her social media savvy skills that help kind of, I guess, rejuvenate the bakery.
That's the plan, is that she's going to use those skills to help um, bring more people to the bakery, and then also to her friend Tyler, who's running a yarn knitting shop. And so using the skills that she has, but then also using the skills that she doesn't necessarily have with baking. So recognizing through her social media savvy that people are interested in those outtakes. They're interested in things that don't go perfect.
Mhm.
And so people will come to the bakery to see, this person who can't bake
Cool.
and to maybe taste some of the things that she manages to actually complete.
I think you were very smart in doing that. I guess there's a new, I guess it's an app. I'm not sure. I don't know the technology, but it's called Be Real, where people are kind of reacting to the perfection of Instagram and they want those real moments.
Yeah, I think that one thing I noticed during the pandemic, I used to watch a lot of baking shows, and they're perfect. Everything comes out perfect. It all happens in 30 minutes or 60 minutes, and there's the shots that you got from those shows were amazing. Well, during the pandemic, the shows continued, but they had to come up with another. You didn't have a photographer living in your home.
Mhm.
And so you had family members and friends who are taking the pictures, and there are a lot of outtakes of the things that didn't go well. And so people kind of gravitate towards that. They love seeing that, okay, I know this famous baker is, wealthy and doing well, but she drops eggs on the floor just like me.
Mhm. You've mentioned the bakery and the food. Did you develop the recipes in two part sugar, one part murder?
A lot of the recipes in two part sugar, one part murder are adaptations from other recipes that I've tried. And then, oh, well, I think it could use a little more of this. And, so you kind of have a base that you start from, but then you tweak it and perfect it and make it your own. There are some things that I just don't like, and I skip those ingredients. And, it's like, yeah, you might like that recipe, but nah, I'm not so much into cinnamon. So I'm going to downplay the cinnamon and I'm going to add more of this. And so they're mostly things that I've adapted.
Hmm. Um, Two part sugar, one part murder is marketed and it's positioned as a cozy mystery. How would you define a cozy mystery? What do you think are the necessary ingredients?
So for cozy mysteries, you almost always have an amateur sleuth, and they typically take place in small towns or in some type of smaller contained setting. There are more cozies that are, kind of expanding out. So you see them in LA and you see them in New York City, but generally you're going to contain the area to maybe the I don't know, college that the protagonist works at, or the bakery and the people who come into the bakery. But usually it's kind of a smaller town setting. And with a cozy, there is not going to be a lot of blood, guts, and gore. So you are not going to get the graphic details of that dead body. You tend to find the protagonist just sort of stumbles across the dead body. And I always equate, when I talk to people about cozies, I always say, have you ever seen Murder, She Wrote? Because that's kind of the quintessential cozy mystery. You've got an amateur solving a case. Jessica Fletcher stumbles across a dead body, and there's not going to be any bad language. So that, and there will be no explicit sex. So no sex, no bad language, and no description of the body or the gore associated with that. So I love the fact that cozy mysteries to me are like a puzzle. So if people like puzzles, I think they would like cozy mysteries, because it's not so much about this dead body on the floor, it's about finding the clues to figure out who done it. So you're reading a story and you're hopefully so lost into the details of the story in this fictional world that the authors created, that you're not necessarily paying attention to the fact that she said there's mud on the bottom of that person's shoe. So that's one of the clues that the author may give you that would help you to figure it out. But hopefully it's not so obvious that you don't get that puzzle feel. You don't feel challenged a little bit.
I think that's really insightful. In many ways, cozy's kind of parallel golden age or classic mysteries, because you do have the focus on the whodunit, and you do have that closed circle of suspects, whether it's a neighborhood or a small town. I had read somewhere, and I'm paraphrasing what you had written, but one of the challenges in writing cozy mysteries is incorporating all the things readers love about it, those elements, but also making it seem realistic. I mean, you can't, it's still murder, so you can't treat it
Right.
as just like a game. How do you walk that line?
It can be a challenge to make sure that you are presenting something. I think part of it is just for me, I like my mysteries to be practical. I love cozy mysteries. I've already suspended my disbelief that this baker, this, knitter, bookshop owner, librarian is going out and they're solving crimes. But there's only so far that I can go. I can't go to, oh, they're going to break into someone's home and they're going to
Mhm.
start ransacking it, or they're going to interrogate someone.
Mhm.
Because part of me is like, why would anybody answer their questions? So
Mhm.
it's, you need to make sure that your sleuth is sleuthing, they're detecting, they're finding out the clues without going too far. So I guess that's it, is just trying to figure out where that line is and what is just too much for me to believe as a reader. And I think a lot of that comes from, I love mystery. So I'm a reader. I have to figure out, well, how far can my imagination go? Can my imagination extend to someone actually, confronting a killer? Or, do I need to back up a little bit and figure out another way to get to my big reveal at the end without putting my heroine in danger and making her do something that I wouldn't do.
That's very thoughtful. Let's talk a little about the writing process itself, because especially with mysteries, at least I'm not a writer, so I'm just imagining, but you have to know where the clues are going to go. There's a structure to it. You can't just kind of throw it all together and hope it sticks, so to speak. What is your own writing? Though there are some authors that do that and they can pull it off. What is your own writing process when you start a mystery? How does it work for you?
So usually when I start a mystery, I always start with the characters. I am very character focused. I spend a lot of time getting to know my characters, getting to know how they're going to respond in different situations. Who is Maddie Montgomery? What is she like? What is she not like? How would she, how is she going to respond if she's, encounters a 250-pound English mastiff for the first time? And so once I feel confident with who my characters are, I generally will start with I almost always know who's going to die. I don't know that I've ever started a mystery and I didn't know who the victim was.
Mhm.
What is often challenging for me is who the killer is.
Ah,
I will start with an idea of who the killer is, but often that can change by the time I get to the end of the book. So I kind of have an idea in my mind of the characters, of the setting, of the situation that I want to put them in. I do a lot of, wow, I wonder what would happen if. I
mhm.
wonder what it would be like if I had someone who was from a big city who never really lived in the Midwest, who was a little bit spoiled and didn't know how to bake, didn't know how to cook, didn't know how to turn on a gas stove. If I put them in a situation where they're in this situation, okay, now how are they going to behave and how are they going to, and then there's a murder and they're going to need to figure out who done it. Now, I call myself a pantser. I don't generally have a detailed play by play of what's going to happen in every scene, every beat of my story. I love to write and let the characters just sort of go where they will and see where the story takes me. I often will find myself in a situation where I'm like, wow, I didn't see that coming. I wonder how we're going to get out of this one. And sometimes I have to set it aside for a minute. I feel like that organic nature is just, it's so exciting and invigorating for me because I hope that I'm as excited about it as readers will be when they look at this scene, because I may not know how to get out of it any more than they do. But generally, the characters will show me how to get out of it. But I think that's the thing that makes these stories so exciting for me. And I hope it comes through in the books as I'm writing them. My editor, on the other hand, would prefer a more detailed outline of everything that's going to happen in the book. And over the years, we've kind of come to, I think, a very good, cozy relationship where I will give him the synopsis of what I think is going to happen.
Mhm.
There's no way he doesn't know that I gloss over the details. So I might spend a page and a half describing a sunset, and because I'm like, and then Maddie finds, and then Maddie investigates. And then, this thing happens that I know is going to happen in this book, and I might spend a page or two describing it, and then I'll rush through some other details, and then I get to the end of the book, and I tell them who I think the who I think did it. And along the way I'm like, hey, yeah, he didn't do it, it was somebody else. So I try to keep him informed when I make a change. And yeah, that's pretty much my process. I think the key is knowing my characters.
Oh, you've been writing for quite a while now. If you could have the opportunity to go back in time to when you were first starting out, what would you tell yourself as a writer? What advice would you give yourself?
Oh my, I think the best advice I ever received, and I wish I'd gotten it sooner, is not to give up, to
Mm.
believe in myself, and to keep writing. You can't edit a blank page. And if you wait for all of the planets to be perfectly aligned before you start, you're going to be waiting an awfully long time. So, I wish I had started sooner. I wish I had believed in myself and not doubted so much, because I'd probably have a lot more books finished than I do right now if I had just had the confidence to keep writing. And, I think the one thing, especially for new writers, is when you get rejections, it's easy to kind of take it personally and to think you're not a good writer because you were rejected, because people don't want to read this book. And one thing I've learned now is that rejection doesn't mean that your book is bad. It doesn't
Yeah.
mean that your story is bad. It's timing. It's, whether this is the right place for the book. And it's also just listening, because I've gotten some great advice from people who, caught the vision with me, So with Camel, my editor at Camel for traveling shoes, I got a lot of rejections for that. And, I had people who told me, oh, you should change. And so make the main character a private investigator instead of a police officer. And I actually rewrote it where that's what happened. And then the editor at Camel was like, this just doesn't feel right. I feel like, and as we talked, I'm like, oh, he's supposed to be a police officer. She's like, yeah, I think that's what you need. And I'm like, I got a version of that book. So that's what, just believing in the story that was in my heart, as opposed to necessarily listening to others and what they thought that book should be. So I don't know, that's a whole lot of stuff I would tell my younger self, but it's keep writing, believe in yourself, and don't give up.
Now, if I understand correctly, in addition to giving yourself advice, you're also working as a mentor at Seton Hill.
I am. So that was just the most wonderful thing when I was asked to join the program and to be a mentor. And so I I feel like Seton Hill gave me so much, because I know that I don't feel that I would be published today had I not gone. And so I am excited about the opportunity to give back and to try and help others and to mentor other writers who want to, get their books published as well. So I'm excited about it. It's very invigorating, because writing can be very lonely. You sit home alone with your laptop and you write. And when I am working with my mentors, I'm reading their stuff and I'm seeing their passion, and it can incite me. And I'm like, yeah, I feel like writing today, because, I've been around other people who are enthusiastic about whatever it is they're writing, and it really helps.
That's great. One of the things that I loved about your new mystery was the fact that you incorporate your own love of classic mysteries into the story. And you talked a little bit about that. You're a big reader. In addition to Golden Age classic mystery writers, who are some of your other favorites, if you'd like to share any?
Oh my gosh, I love mysteries. I have so many. I love British historic cozy. So I'm a huge fan of Agatha Christie. I love Victoria Thompson, Emily Brightwell, Rex Stout. I love the Nero Wolfe series. They're just amazing. I love Sherlock Holmes. I have a whole lot of loves. Jill Churchill and George.
Yeah.
Just amazing writers. I also love Alexa Gordon has the Gethsemane Brown mysteries that I thought were fun. They're set in Ireland, and I see a lot of British mystery set in the UK. In England, not necessarily a lot in Ireland, but there are quite a few.
Mhm.
So let me think. Oh, wow. My bookshelves are full of mysteries and cozies, and I have a lot of, I like Deborah Goldstein. I think she might have triggered my desire to want to write a culinary cozy about someone who can't cook. So
Mhm.
she's got her Sarah Blair mysteries, and oh man, just tons of great mysteries.
What's next for you as an author? Can you share anything with us?
Yeah, actually, I am going to be starting a new series
Oh,
with Berkeley, and it's a pet detective
oh,
mystery. The protagonist is a children's book author, and she has a bloodhound, Bailey, and Bailey is the, I guess, instigator that gets her into trouble and figuring out crime. So that's going to be the next series that I have that I'm working on. I also still have my mystery bookshop series, and the 8th book in that series comes out later this year in December.
yeah.
And then there will be at least 2 more Baker Street mysteries.
Oh,
So I have the second book I've turned in, Murder is a Piece of Cake. And yeah, so I'll have those 3 series that I'm working on.
that's great. How can readers learn more about you? Are you on particular social media platforms? Do you have a website?
I'm on pretty much all of the social media platforms, but the best way to find out what's going on with me and what books are coming up is through my website, vmburns.com. And I have a newsletter. You can sign up for my newsletter at my website, and you will get all kinds of information about new releases and also giveaways. I usually give away books or gift cards to buy books about once a month. And I'm also pretty active on Facebook and under VM Burns. So if you look for VM Burns or VM Burns books on pretty much any social media platform, you're gonna find me.
Well, that's great. I can't believe how quickly our time has gone by. You've just been an absolute delight to interview. Our author today is Valerie Burns, whose new book is 2 parts sugar, 1 part murder. And from what we've heard, there's more in the works, which is great news. I'd like to thank Valerie for taking time to join us today, and thank those of you listening in.
Thank you. I had a great time.
Oh, good. Until the next time at the Poison Pen.